All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello, all. It is a Halloween. I know. It's kind of scary. We've got some pics to share a little bit later related to Halloween. Glad everybody could make it. A lot to get to today, and this is a day where it's really, Kim, it's just you and me.
That's okay. Yeah. I'll be alone with you for a few minutes. It's all right.
Tony, at the last second, got a call from KFI Radio.
Thanks, Tony.
So he had to go over there because he's on call there, and they pay benefits and stuff. I was saying, because we pay
benefits on the Mark Thompson Show network.
Well, we pay actually 30% more than he makes over there. Okay, the per hour rate, because I'm trying to give people a decent wage, and I'm also trying to incentivize people to show up to work. But we don't pay back. We don't. We're just.
There's no retirement package, 401k.
Yeah, there's no retirement package, exactly. So Tony is not here today,
Thanks,
but
Tony.
so just you and me, Kim, and it'll be Kim for the second hour. I got to run to the doctor. I got a flu shot yesterday, and it's actually hit me with some side effects.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah. Fortunately, one of the side effects is I become insanely smart. So you'll love that.
Like that's any different than a normal day, please.
Oh, no, it's another level of intellect I've just noticed. Yeah. So,
are we talking David Cay Johnston level intellect?
No, absolutely not. Well, David's got two things. He's got intellect
really
and discipline.
Rise to that level.
Yeah. David is the Pulitzer Prize winner, all these investigative awards.
There is no competition there.
He's amazing. He's he puts the J in journalist, so it's really cool. We're going to talk to him right now, as a matter of fact. How about it for the great David Cay Johnston?
Yes.
David, I want to thank you for appearing on our show a little bit earlier. For those who are watching live, David normally is in the second hour of the show, but he's pushed up his appearance so I could chat with you because I have to go to doctor, second hour, blah, blah, blah. So, David, this is real, this possibility, or you'll help me calibrate how real it is, but the notion that Trump might get tossed off the ballot in a couple of states, it only probably would take one, because of violations of the 14th Amendment. It was talked about, but now it's actually going to trial?
Right. CREW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, and some other parties have brought a case in Colorado. Now, why they chose Colorado first, I don't know, but the core of their argument is that Trump doesn't need to be convicted of a crime. He doesn't need a judicial finding. In fact, he doesn't actually, although I don't think they concede this in the papers, have to engage in insurrection. The 14th Amendment's Article 3, or Section 3, only requires that you give aid or comfort to insurrectionists. And I think it's pretty difficult to argue that Trump did not give aid or comfort to the insurrectionists. Now, we're in an area here that is largely untested. There was a New Mexico state court that removed a county commissioner who had been involved in the January 6th insurrection under this clause. The Trump lawyers, of course, say this is a ridiculous interpretation of the law. Well, I think the plain reading of the law is very clear. Trump is not eligible because he gave aid and he gave comfort. The law says or, but aid or comfort to the insurrectionists. And this case will almost certainly end up before the U.S. Supreme Court, even though our Constitution says that states are in charge of their elections unless Congress passes legislation specifically addressing this, like the Voting Rights Act that was largely gutted by the Supreme Court. I would expect that at least one state somewhere will keep him off the ballot, probably more than one. But if it's in a state he's likely to win, Louisiana, it would be an irrelevancy it would be very relevant. If it's in a state like
right.
New York, Massachusetts, or California, where he has no prospect of winning.
It doesn't matter if he's on the ballot or not there.
It doesn't matter if he's on the ballot or not, exactly, because he won't get those electoral college votes. The troubling part of this is that there is far more support being found by pollsters for Trump than makes any kind of logic or sense. Emotionally understandable, but not on the basis on which the founders and the framers set up our country, which was a reasoned, factual debate. Now, the polls do show that if you ask sideways questions, not, do you support Trump or Biden, but where are you on various things, his support falls away. So a fair amount of indication that support is pretty soft, number one. Number two, as I think I've mentioned on your show before, we have good reason not to think that political polls are currently reliable, because less than 1 in 100 people who are contacted by telephone will take the poll. And John Geraci, who's a pollster here in Rochester, we have a long history of big pollsters being based here in Rochester because of commercial interests. In his book, Poll, P-O-L-L, Arised, goes into the reasons that for political polls, we should be very skeptical of their nature. But that said, clearly there are huge numbers of people who support Trump. On the other side of that, his rallies, as we first started documenting at DC Report several years ago, they're drawing smaller crowds, and the crowds are made up more of the people who travel from rally to rally as regulars.
Yeah, those who like the show, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, David. I want to get to the rallies and his support and the way it seems to be evaporating, and also who he is now in a second. But I wanted to ask you about what you touched on. One of the virtues, I thought, of U.S. elections and the system, and there are a lot of things that are not virtuous, is this state thing that you're talking about, that essentially, the feds can't meddle too much with the states, unless it's a civil rights thing, as you suggested. So it's interesting to me that on a question like this, it would be bumped up to the federal level. Is that odd, or is that wrong?
Appeal. Yeah, there will absolutely be an appeal to try and get it to the federal courts. The Trump people will do that without question. They may get rejected. If they get rejected by a district court judge, they'll go to the Court of Appeals that's based in Denver, and then they would try and appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, which takes only a tiny fraction of the cases presented to it. And I would be surprised if the Supreme Court took this up, but who knows?
So that would be the play then, David, that the Supreme Court wouldn't take it up, and then you'd end up with the lower courts having decided.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, I think that normally the Supreme Court doesn't take up issues unless there is a major conflict between district courts of appeal. So the Court of Appeal in Denver for the Rocky Mountain states, and the Court of Appeal in San Francisco for California, and I think it's Oregon, have different interpretations of the same issue.
Sure.
They rarely take up a case where there's no dispute among districts, appellate districts. But we're in uncharted waters here. And I don't think Trump's argument that the law doesn't apply to him has much substance. The Constitution says what the Constitution says, and certainly Justices Gorsuch and Coney Barrett and Thomas are going to be hit with an argument that, you've invented this, major issues doctrine, and would not help Trump. But, unfortunately, we have a court, the high court, that is both very political now. Courts are always somewhat political based on who appointed the justices, but very political. And more importantly, we have one for sure, Clarence Thomas, and possibly two utterly corrupt judges on the court. Thomas, if he was on any other court, would have been removed by now.
Yeah,
I come from regular stock.
yeah, right. Go ahead, Kim.
I have a question. So, reading the text of the 14th Amendment, and I'll just reiterate it, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president or vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or an officer of the U.S. or as any member of state legislature, blah, 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 swore to support the Constitution shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So you don't have to be convicted of it.
Right.
Who decides? Who's the arbiter of like whether you're an insurrectionist or have provided aid or comfort or not?
Courts are going to decide that. Judges are going to decide that. This was passed, remember, in an era when the South lost.
Right.
Many people in the South were not at all willing to submit to the fact that they had lost. The people had to carry papers if they were not deemed to be enemies of the country, and Army troops, up until I think it was 1872, they would stop people, white people, and ask for their papers to establish whether they were active enemies of the U.S. And I would argue that there are many people in the South and some in the legislature who are, in fact, dedicated enemies of the United States government, including the speaker, the current speaker, Mike Johnson.
Wow.
Because by their actions, they make it clear that Johnson was one of the leading people in the effort to overthrow the government in 2020. Now, he wasn't on the physical insurrection side. He was on the legal side of coming up with arguments. But then under this 14th Amendment, he shouldn't be where he is either. I would agree. But, as a practical matter, laws are not generally enforced. Okay. A minority of people who commit murders go to prison. When the police tell you they solved a crime, all that means is they're convinced that they know who did it, and they may not even be able to arrest that person because they don't have enough evidence of it. And so this is a matter of, priorities and issues that people want to bring. But the people at Crew have been very successful so far in their lawsuits to obtain documents, to change various things. They've lost some cases, but overall they have a very solid track record, which tells you they have good lawyers. Donald, on the other hand, has been reduced to being represented by not very good lawyers. And the very good lawyers he used to have, people like Ty Cobb, the grandson of the great baseball player, Bill Barr, his attorney general, have essentially said Trump belongs in prison. He's committed crimes. He should be convicted. And when convicted, he should go to prison.
It's interesting that Kim points to what is the obvious fact, that the new Speaker of the House is, full-on insurrectionist, as you say, on the legal side. But if I can segue into the politics of the new Speaker, I have a question for you, which is, this guy doesn't line up David Cay Johnston with any and I know we've run down polls, but people have spoken with their vote. In the midterms, when you look at Roe v. Wade, and I think the ripple effects of this intense Christian right movement in this country legislatively, that's come back and bitten the Republicans. Yet this guy is the head of the spear. He's unbelievable. I think he, because people don't know him very well, he's sort of gotten away with it. But he's really, as he's a diehard. So my question to you is, if the Democrats get the word out more about who Mike Johnson is, might that be, just get more light into this guy's life and where he stands? Might that be a political winner?
Well, maybe, and I emphasize maybe because, the theory of our government is that people are educated, informed, engage in debate, robust, rigorous, often crude debate, but nonetheless debate about the facts. That's not true of a lot of the American population, unfortunately. Mitt Romney said many people in his party, the Republican Party, don't believe in democracy. Mike Johnson is a white Christian nationalist. So understand what that means. He's not a Christian. If you're a Christian, you don't hold the views that he does. And I would argue he's not even a nationalist. He's a tribalist. He wants people who think like him to be in control. You combine him with the Supreme Court adopting this new major doctrine, and that, if something wasn't the habit of the country at the time of its founding or doesn't have a deep tradition, we can't have it. These are people who would bring back marital rape, wife beating. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that wife beating was routine in this country. It still goes on, but it was routine. I attended a state legislative hearing in San Francisco in the late 70s where women from wealthy households whose husbands beat them, one was a bank president and another was successful in, I forget, some other very high-level field, beat them, and they testified about this. Unfortunately, the news coverage out of that, since my story was killed by the LA Times, was only about the women from blue-collar or farm worker or other poor backgrounds whose husband beat them, because a lot of people couldn't imagine that wealthy men would do this sort of thing. And in Mike Johnson, you have someone who wants government. He says he's for freedom, but he wants government to control women's bodies. He wants to get rid of the social safety network. And look at the latest thing that the Republicans are proposing here: aid to Israel. Wherever you are on the issue about Israel and Hamas and the way the Israelis are prosecuting the war, the U.S. government's going to support Israel in this matter. But he wants to finance it by cutting the budget of the IRS dollar for dollar for the money that goes to Hamas. Who benefits from cutting the IRS budget? Very wealthy tax cheats. And the rest of us pay the price through higher taxes, fewer government services, and annoyance in trying to deal with an underfunded IRS with inadequate technology. I mean, these people hate the United States of America as it is. And Johnson is a good example of this. There's a video of he and his wife on what appears to be the stage of a church for more than an hour, and professing their views. And one of their views is that this is a Christian nation. No, it's not. Twice in the Constitution, we explicitly make clear it's not. But this lie is so deeply believed by many people in America that it's become a major political problem for the country.
Yeah, and invoking, the word of the divine to somehow justify, whatever interpretation you have of the good book. And by the way, when asked about his policies and his sort of legislative disposition, he says, get a Bible. That's my legislative disposition.
Yeah, so presumably he's in favor of, in fact, he is in favor of criminalizing homosexual conduct. He would eliminate same-sex marriage. And if you want to go further, I guess he'll, want men to be able to sell their daughters into slavery and to execute children who speak disrespectfully to their parents, because you can find all that in the Bible.
In that spirit, David, you make the point that notwithstanding that, people vote on personality, on emotion, often, they're single issue voters as well. And so I don't know. As I was saying, I think if you shed more light on this and, it's talked about more, then at least it gets out there. I don't know at the end of the day, to use the, now tired phrase, how it has an effect on the election, on various elections in various places, and certainly the presidential election.
Yeah, I think that, just a second, I've got it. Sorry, I thought I turned off.
It's okay, it's fine. Yeah, the effect on the election, I don't know.
Yeah, the fundamental most important thing is people vote their pocketbook. V.O. Key, in the book published after he died, it came out about 1962, lays out, showing persuasively, going back through many elections, that in presidential elections, people vote their pocketbook. I was surprised the other day when I spoke at the Stop Trump Summit in New York City that Stuart Stevens, who was Romney's campaign manager, had never heard of V.O. Key. But his findings are sort of fundamental. The economy is doing incredibly well, but that isn't something that resonates with people, especially if you're in the bottom half or 2/3, because much of the inflation we have is with food and fuel.
Right. And so that really hits you.
Airline fares go down or hotel fares go down.
Sure.
That doesn't affect a large segment of the population. The Dobbs decision hopefully will not have worn through. That should motivate people to go to the polls in large numbers.
And that's incumbent upon the Democrats to remind.
Turn out the vote. Elections are about two things: getting people registered and keeping them now registered because of all the efforts to purge voter rolls, and then getting them to actually go to the polls or to vote. Jennifer and I just voted early here in New York in our local elections. Judges, school boards, things like that.
Sure.
But large numbers of people don't vote. The Republican primaries in Louisiana, apparently less than 40% turnout. And that's how you get people like Cay Johnston, who represent a minority viewpoint, but they get out their supporters to vote. And the Republicans have, I admire how they have spent the last 40 years building up an infrastructure, building up a bench by running people for everything from mosquito abatement district and school board to county elections clerk, while the Democrats, have not paid attention to their knitting. And I've been directly critical of the Democrats about they're not paying attention to these things, and they're not making it clear, in my view, on a marketing level, that the policies being pursued by people like Cay Johnston are beneficial only to the best off among us, and that the policies the Democrats have are beneficial to people further down the income ladder. And you may recall that Barack Obama met a guy now dead who called himself Joe the Plumber, in Toledo, Ohio, and almost word for word out of one of my books, he tried to explain to him that under the Obama tax plan, this guy would be able to save more money to start a business and be much better off. And if you watch the whole 12-minute thing on YouTube, the astonishing part is the other guy isn't listening to him. He has a perspective. Obama bad. Doesn't matter what the facts are. And this is one of the core problems here is it doesn't matter what the facts are. I'm angry. And boy, do we have a lot of angry people in this country across the spectrum. There are plenty of people who think of themselves as progressives who are really angry. And it's a sign, I think, of the mismanagement of our economy and our government that's been going on for the last 40-some years.
Well, and then when there's mismanagement, David, I would respectfully suggest that there is a blame game that goes on, but it goes on now with an arch quality that that is fueled by social media. I don't mean to make social media the boogeyman all the time, but yeah.
I agree. I am always stunned when I put up something I know will be controversial on either my Facebook page or my Twitter page or Threads, although there are a lot of people there, at the responses I get from people who don't like it. Very few of them are reasoned.
Right.
And they're generally, well, you're a POS or something else crude. There's no substance there, and they're often factually wrong. I especially love the people who put up that, well, obviously I'm a communist who hates capitalism. Gee, I wrote a best-selling trilogy defending actual capitalism and denouncing corporate socialism, and some guy posted on my feed the other day, well, just because you said you denounced it doesn't mean you're not in favor of it. It's like, excuse me?
I didn't see that. I check out your feed. I think your stuff's funny too. You also include some funny stuff. You can see we have it up there if you want to check out David on X or whatever. It's at David KJ. But listen, I only have another minute with you, so let me just quickly ask. There's another thing we haven't touched on, and I thought of you as Trump begins to break down mentally. He doesn't know where he is. Now the stuff's advertised. He confuses these different autocrats that he loves so much, and I wanted to ask you the most recent one, his gaffe of the Sioux Falls and Sioux City, as he campaigns in Iowa. As he shows sort of the same kind of gaffe-prone moves that we ascribe to a Biden, might there be a real chink in the Trump armor, or is it just truly immovable?
Well, there's a group of people who can be moved. The pure Trumpers are not going to be moved. The people who, admire Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump together are not going to be moved. But clearly there are people who can be broken off and persuaded on a policy level to be away from Trump, that doesn't solve the underlying problem. There are a whole bunch of people in line behind Trump who would still create a government of the rich, by the rich, for the rich. In fact, that's not even accurate. By the billionaire class, for the billionaire class, against everybody else. And that's a function of what's gone wrong with campaign finance, both in disclosure terms and in the Supreme Court's position that money and speech are equatable.
But as a threat to democracy, David, do you see a distinction between Trump and those who are on the bench behind him?
Some of them there is, some of them there are not. I mean, I don't think Nikki Haley is as troubling as Donald Trump, but Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, and Mike Johnson. I think they're a serious threat. I think this is going to be a very long-term challenge to our liberties, because there are all sorts of people who want liberty for my group, and you will do what we allow. And that's what all of the post-war movements by minorities, particularly Black people, by women, and by LGBTQ plus people have been about, is expanding the franchise, expanding the notion of liberty on a practical level. And a lot of people want to stuff that back in the box. And if they get the opportunity, they will.
I know we lose you for a week. You're taking a week off. You deserve it. You really deserve it. But we so appreciate our time with you, and I guess we'll talk to you in 2 weeks, right?
2 weeks. Talk to you in 2 weeks.
Good stuff. David Cay Johnston, everybody. Thanks, David, so much. Really appreciate it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Wow. Well, glad that he could jump in, and
Yeah.
it's not a pretty picture. Although, again, I see the faltering of Trump on the stump as, if you're anti-Trump, which I think is a reasonable position. It's encouraging. I mean, because so much is made of Biden's diminished cognitive acuity. There has to be a couple of ding words in there.
Something I found when I was looking up research while David Cay Johnston was speaking about the whole Trump thing. Here's an interesting case, and you probably have heard of this before, but in September of 2022, a state court judge in New Mexico ruled that this man, Couy Griffin, who was a county commissioner and founder of the group Cowboys for Trump, had to be removed from his government position and is prohibited from seeking or holding any federal or state office under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. The reason that's important is because of his participation in the January 6th assault, which means that a state judge, now under precedent, right, found that January 6th was an insurrection and qualified under the 14th Amendment. So while it's only a state judge, it's still significant. And I didn't know that.
It's connected, absolutely. But it is an odd, looking the other way that goes on. There's, as David said, the law isn't always enforced. It's enforced selectively. We've seen that for years.
It's the Constitution. Either we have it or we don't have it. Either
it's also
apply the law or don't have the law.
Yeah, there's an interpretive aspect to the Constitution, just like there's an interpretive aspect to the Bible. I mean, look what they've done with the Second Amendment. I mean, it's been perverted way beyond anything reasonable. But David says precedent means nothing anymore. This is one of our David B.
Yeah.
But it's nonetheless interesting. I thought his first point, just to button it out, was interesting also, which is, listen, if it's happening in a state that Trump would lose anyway, it is almost immaterial. But to the degree that it can be a template for other states, it gets to a purple state, It's tough, though. A lot has to happen for the case to proceed, But, a Wisconsin, a Pennsylvania, you can see how, there could be, real political haymade of that. So, anyway, there's a great visit with David Cay Johnston. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Kim, you are kind of the producer in resident if you're just joining us.
I am.
Tony was scheduled to be here, but he's can't do it.
Thanks, Tony.
That's what happens to me when someone else doesn't show up. I have
you
to
are.
do their job.
That's the great thing about being
the
able to
hat
do
is
it all.
handed to me. Yeah, yeah.
I have to say that of the things that the producers do on this show, being on the air with us, just to kind of share with you a little bit of the, because I feel like everybody who supports us and watches us regularly, and we live out loud to you. So when we have problems, we share them. We have victories, we share them, et cetera, and triumphs. But one of the things that the producer is asked to do is break out those videos and break out the podcast. So today, to Tony's credit, he said he'll do that, but he won't be able to do it till later because he's working at KFI right now.
Thanks,
so
Tony.
he'll be maybe Kim, you or David or someone can break out the podcast. I know you got you got your own show after this, so we'll see. But you will get everything. I promise everybody.
I can have my tech support in the other room break out the podcast.
That would be great. That would really be great. But I promise to all our viewers and listeners, you will get the show in all the different ways that we will drop David Cay Johnston as a separate video, and you'll get the podcast, and all that stuff will happen. Now, I think if you've been with us at all, you know that Kim is not going out for Halloween. She is staying in. She's sending. Right? You said that's what you said. You said you're not going out with the kids. Oh
no, I'll go out with the kids. Yeah, I've got a 9-year-old. I got to go.
Oh,
he can't be trusted on his own at night. No, I'm not going to send him around the neighborhood.
Then I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Julia, though, my 14-year-old has decided to boycott Halloween.
Yeah, Julia's going on her own.
Yeah.
Right.
Or she's not going at all. But she's kind of a naysayer this year. You know.
She's not. It's a pain to dress up, and I went to a great pumpkin carving party. You didn't have to carve the pumpkin.
Did you carve?
I didn't. I had in years past, but I didn't this year. They're really good. But I mean, they're other level. If you go to my Instagram, which is Mark Thompson TV, you can see the. You know what I should have done? This is bad planning. Although that I should have
brought pictures.
Yeah. Well, you can rally the Instagram.
Though.
Do what Tony does. Tony would have that up in 2 seconds.
Well, you know what? I am.
Mark,
Tony.
I'm not Tony. Okay.
I don't even have Instagram. What are you talking about?
Oh my God! How can
I have one? I just don't use it.
Oh my God!
I can't believe you could say that.
Yeah, I'm not going to rally those pictures. We're just going to move on.
Oh my God, Kim!
This is how I produce the show.
That is really Kim is.
Kim, how are you?
Checking out.
I do have pictures. We did get sent pictures by Lee of his pumpkin carving exploits. Would you like to see some?
Yeah, let's see those. Those are really cool, actually. Now, you have to understand, those
are good pumpkins.
They've been doing this that's their daughter on the left. Mm-hmm. And they've been doing this, since she was a little kid. And I just, he says that young woman in the first shot standing next to Eileen is the little girl 30 years earlier. Next to the Bert and Ernie jack-o'-lantern. Do you see that little girl next to Bert and Ernie? Now, 30 years later, she's in that shot you saw before. There it is. That's really cool. It's one of our regular listeners and supporters, Lee and Eileen, and it's really wishing them a happy. Those are great.
Those are really cute. Their whole family gets into it, though. Look at that.
That's super cool. Yeah.
I love it. Wonderful.
There's another level of creativity on these pumpkins. It's really great.
As a matter of fact, their kids may be older now, but Lee and Eileen, they're still rocking the pumpkin carving together. Look at this. Here they go. Those are some really good. Look at that Dracula pumpkin.
Now, that's not professionally done. They did that?
Well, I think what you do is you put a thing, a sheet over.
A stencil or something?
Like a stencil, and then you can, carve through the plastic or the stencil. So you have a guide, but still, wow. Really good.
You think stencil is a ding word?
No.
I don't think, no, it's not a ding word. I don't think.
I wouldn't give that a ding.
We have a separate crew
far be it from me to
just the thumbs up, thumbs down. All right. I'm not dinging it, though. I'm not. Love it. Love it. However you spend your Halloween, I hope you do it safely. And
are you going to dress up?
No. Yes, I am.
You're going to be a devil?
Reprising my costume from last year.
Which is?
Such a big hit. Reprising is a big word. No, it's astronaut.
Oh, yes.
And I have the full astronaut jumpsuit, as you know. I think we showed it last year.
Yeah.
And the NASA which I got. I think it was $19.99. Maybe it was. I was surprised that these spacesuits are so cheap. I expected, I've seen that NASA budget, and it looks like they're really expensive. But I guess once you knock them off a few times, so it's also kind of the problem for me. And then I'm gonna move on. I've got Jefferson Graham coming up, and I've got Kim's News.
Yeah.
The problem for me is I've got to do radio in Los Angeles tonight. So by the time I get to the party, I'm only going to be like an hour. It's going to be like an hour. So
Sure.
I don't know. It's going to be an awkward
That's
Halloween.
going to be
I think.
festive though on the radio on Halloween. There's always somebody's
I hope
always
so.
bringing in the dish of candy.
Maybe.
People are the guy in the booth has got the weird hat on with the ears. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah. It should be. It should be interesting. I don't
There's a reason that this place is fun.
Yeah, Halloween's not the reason, though. But smash the like button if you would. Haven't asked you all.
With your iron rod.
Yeah, smash it with your iron rod. Give us a thumbs up. It does help us. We are a completely crowd-funded show. So appreciate everybody who has supported us on Patreon and PayPal. In fact, tomorrow I'll be acknowledging many of the people on PayPal and Patreon just as kind of a shout-out to them because I'm so touched by the way we have a community of supporters, so it really does help. So, again, smash the like button. It costs you
with
nothing.
Your iron rod.
And Kim's News, and then Jefferson Graham on Tech Tuesday. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yes, on the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore. Yay, woohoo! Happy Halloween! So that's an awkward transition because now I have to talk about war. There it is. Yeah. Israel's military says it is continuing to intensify its ground invasion in Gaza. A spokesperson says Israeli forces also struck Hezbollah targets in Lebanon and attacked a military building in Syria. More than 9,000 people have reportedly been killed on both sides of the conflict since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. But again, the numbers being reported from the different sources that may or may not be accurate. U.S. officials now say at least 36 Americans were killed when Hamas gunmen stormed Israel's border earlier this month. That is what Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told lawmakers while testifying today before a Senate panel. There's a handful of Americans also believed to be among the more than 200 hostages taken prisoner by Hamas as well.
I have to say that I've gotten emails saying, how come you're so pro-Hamas?
Really?
And then I've gotten other emails saying, how come you're so pro-Israel?
Yeah. That's when you know you're doing it right because you're trying
I'm really trying to be as objective as I can. I think that there are some brutal, grim, grotesque realities. And it's very hard to discuss any of the realities without sort of getting into it. And then if you kind of jump in when I'm in the middle of it, it may seem as though I'm a rah-rah for one or the other. It's a horrifying humanitarian tragedy. The entire region is affected and the entire world is affected. And we try to be as even-handed as we can be. But, again, criticism from both sides is welcome. I mean, I do welcome criticism and enlightenment from all sides. So
it's hard. It's very hard to make everybody happy because some people only want to hear one thing. Some people only want to hear the other thing. So trying to, stay in the middle has been proven very difficult. This is
the poster child for Brooks Brothers.
This is Mike.
His new campaign.
Everybody's buddy, Mike.
Right.
He's your friend.
The new tie collection at Brooks Brothers, as fashioned by Mike Johnson.
The White House is calling House Speaker Mike Johnson's proposal to separate Israel funding from Ukraine aid deeply concerning. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said the Republican bill in the House doesn't meet America's national security needs. He noted the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell supports bundling aid for both countries into the same package. The bill being pushed by Speaker Johnson includes more than $14 billion in emergency funding for Israel while clawing back the same amount of IRS funding from the Inflation Reduction Act. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called the proposal woefully inadequate.
Well, it's a flex that will never amount to anything because the Senate's not going to pass it. It's just absurd. But it's virtue signaling, or it's less than virtue signaling, whatever the non-virtue signaling.
This guy. I wonder, do you think because of his extreme politics that in the upcoming election, Americans will be moved to vote for more Democrats
Well,
to
that's
shuffle
exactly
these
what I
people out
asked
of the
David
House?
Cay Johnston. I asked him that very question. He looks like Tim Kazurinsky is right, Tom. That's absolutely right. Well, and David's answer to that question was, sadly, a lot of people don't vote on issues. You have to kind of get the issues out there. So to the extent that you can expose the issues, that was my question. I mean, if you expose enough of what a fundamentalist guy this is, I was going to use a different word, he, I think, is very vulnerable, and so is the GOP. It's a bad look. Most everything that comes out of this guy's mouth is alt-right Christian nationalist, and you have to get that out there, but getting it out there is a chore, and so.
Trump. Let's talk about this. We mentioned it earlier here on the Mark Thompson Show. These challenges to keep former President Trump off the 2024 presidential ballot in 2 states will be heard in court this week. A trial over a lawsuit filed by a group in Colorado began yesterday. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Supreme Court will hear oral arguments this week in a similar case. And we've talked to former federal prosecutor David Katz here on the Mark Thompson Show, who has said it's probably not going to amount to much, but I say, go Colorado. You go get it. In Marin County, they're back to masking up. It's time to mask up at all healthcare settings in Marin. So staff and patients and visitors will have to cover up in hospitals and skilled nursing facilities too. It's because of the threat of COVID and other respiratory viruses during flu season. The new rule stays in effect through March 31st to cover the fall and winter when the risk of getting sick is the highest.
I mean, I got this flu shot yesterday, guys, and I'm telling you, man, I've got all these. I got body aches. I'm not feeling well. I'm tired. It's I don't know. I don't know. But it definitely. I have to go get the COVID shot in a couple of weeks, and then I got to get the pneumonia shot and the shingle shot. It totally blunts your enthusiasm for getting any more vaccines. But yeah,
it's worth it, though. It's worth it. I mean, would
you
rather feel uncomfortable for a couple days, or would you rather have shingles in your eyes? No.
You're right.
No.
Thank you.
No.
Okay.
Apple.
Thank you, doctor.
You're welcome. Happy to be here. Proud to serve.
Yeah.
Apple.
How are you? Right. Okay.
Apple is introducing the first 3 nanometer chips for personal computers. The next generation M3, M3 Pro, and M3 Max will allow more transistors to be packed into a smaller space, improving the speed and efficiency. Apple says the M3 family brings massive enhancements to new features on the new MacBook Pro and the iMac as well.
Well, we'll talk to Jefferson Graham about that, but you know who was involved in that 3 nanometer research and actually bringing it into the retail market was, I think it was Dr. Emil Schoenhausen. Yeah, Emil Schoenhausen the third. Yeah, he was involved in it.
That guy is everywhere.
He's a brilliant man, and he's underheralded.
The Texas Rangers are 2 wins away from their first ever World Series championship. Rangers took a 2-1 lead in the best of 7 series with a Game 3 win over the Arizona Diamondbacks last night. Game 4 tonight at Chase Field in Phoenix, if you're watching the World Series.
I know you won't miss a second of it, Kim.
I'm not missing the second
Balancing your trick-or-treating in the World Series game.
Yeah, this is not
so much?
My priorities. Oh, Matthew Perry. His fellow Friends stars say they are utterly devastated by his death over the weekend. Jennifer Aniston, Courtney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, Matt LeBlanc, and David Schwimmer wrote in a statement to People magazine that the group was more than castmates but their family, and that they will say more in time. Perry, of course, found dead of an apparent drowning at his Los Angeles home Saturday. The toxicology reports there are still pending. Lastly, it is so sad. I mean, 54 years old, man.
And he seemed to have really, at least outwardly have conquered his addiction. I know he's on medicines. There were, I believe, prescription meds found in the house. But again, we have to wait for more. But it's just, no matter what, it's just sad.
It's something good. I'll end it on a positive note here. Superheroes are climbing the walls of a children's hospital in San Diego today. On Halloween, window washers wearing tights, capes, and masks, surprising patients at the Rady Children's Hospital. Superman, Spider-Man, Mr. Incredible, Batman, Captain America, Thor, the Hulk, the Flash. They're all cleaning windows at the acute care pavilion for several hours. Patients can wave and interact with their favorite superheroes and take a few pictures. Drivers might see them as well in San Diego. Again, it's at the Rady Children's Hospital on Children's Way.
No,
Yeah, it's kind of a sweet thing for people to do.
it is indeed.
This report is sponsored by, Tenuta Vineyards in beautiful Livermore. There's the flight of wine. There's the beautiful vineyards in the background. And
That's my first flight of wine.
first flight
I get
of
out
wine.
there, I'm good for a couple of flights, is all
Let me
I'm
tell
saying.
you, that's the
Yes.
place to go for flights. They've got
Oh,
choices.
yes.
28 varietals on the
I'd be
tasting
willing
room
to bet
menu.
my lunch that there's alcohol involved.
Yeah, there is. 14 reds, 14 whites. At TenutaWinery.com, there's discounts on the tasting purchases, on the case purchases, and you get your Mark Thompson Show 10% off. You know, it's an exclusive deal here. You just say, smash it with your iron rod.
Mm-hmm.
Do it with gusto, once more with feeling, and you get your 10% off.
Smash it with your iron
I don't
rod.
think you have
Thank
to do
you.
it with gusto, but all
You
right.
have to. It's gusto. You got to give it a little
All right.
woohoo on this Halloween.
Oh my God.
Call Rich at the winery and say, smash it with your iron rod. You get your 10% off. It is 925-699-4576. And our humongous thanks to the folks at Tenuta Vineyards, where you give them 30 minutes and you'll be friends for life.
Wow.
Thank you for sponsoring this newscast. Mhm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Do you
This
wanna-
is
yeah. Okay.
The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
How about if the guy on Tech Tuesday comes through? He's the great Jefferson Graham. You know him from Photo Walks TV. You know him from his many appearances on this show. He's all over the web. He's all over YouTube. He's always got good stuff on shooting with iPhones, various pictures, but he's also terrific on tech stuff. And there was huge tech stuff happening, Jefferson Graham, and I'm glad you're here. We can talk about it.
Thank you.
This AI, the promise of AI, the threat of AI, it is talked about so much. For the first time, there is an effort on the part of the government, represented by the Biden administration in this case, to try to control or in some ways put governors on AI. Can you give us a sense of what's going on there and what you think?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm glad they're taking the steps. But second of all, okay, that's where I'm at. It's a big or a meh. Which do you prefer, or meh?
Meh, I think, is better.
meh.
Would suggest you didn't hear it too well. Meh would suggest you... All right,
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay, so
I didn't think that was
two-
going to be a point of contention.
Yeah, two things. They're introducing standards to have watermarks to ID AI products. Good. And they want the companies to have safety tests to evaluate conversation bots like ChatGPT. Fine. No enforcement though. Okay, so if I don't put a watermark up, what's going to happen to me?
Oh, that's a
So-
great point. I didn't realize there was no enforcement.
Yeah, well-intentioned. I'm glad they're doing it, but I think that I think Karen Cooper just said that AI is already out of control. I agree, and I don't think there's anything the government has done with this executive order to rein it in.
Well, what would you suggest be done?
Well, luckily I'm not running for office. What could be done? How about some
they need to.
enforcement?
Yeah.
How about some enforcement?
Okay.
How about
so you
what
like the
enforcement-
watermark thing, but you want it enforced?
I want it enforced. Let's have some actual oversight over Google and Facebook and Microsoft. There is no enforcement. They have these lawsuits occasionally every few years, and let's see where those go. But there's no real enforcement. If you break the law, what is going to happen to you? It's the same thing as we talk about here in California. The smash and grabs. They've learned that there's no enforcement, so they just steal everything out of these stores, and they don't get arrested. And if they do, they get sent home.
Why can't AI get hands right? Maud says. Do they have trouble with hands like the old Blade Runner movie?
I find they have trouble with text. Yeah, when I usually ask DAL-E to create something for me, and I put the words in there, it cannot spell the words.
Yeah, well,
but I think my hands are okay though.
Is an enforcement provision even possible legally by executive order? Perhaps the executive order is a framework for pushing actual legislation, Natalie says. Well,
okay, sure. I mean, I don't know.
California was actually cutting edge in terms of privacy issues when it came to the web. Could it be handled on the state level the way California's handled that?
50 different states. How's that working out for the abortion stuff? You know, it's a whole hodgepodge of insanity.
Well, the reality is that it worked out pretty well in California for the privacy issue, because what happens is when you are on the web in California, they must post, similar to what they do in Europe, your approval to accept the various terms and conditions and privacy gives that people have. So, I mean, it might work.
But come on, Mark, have you ever said no to any of that stuff?
I've changed the cookies that they want.
Yeah, but if Google says you must approve this before you go to our website, do you say, well, I'm not going to approve it, and then you get to continue on to Google? Or you just say no to cookies?
Oh, well, I mean, in that case, I don't know what I would do. You're right. I might be okay with it. I mean, you're certainly I made this point for years that we approve terms and conditions and privacy violations all the time, which is why it's so funny to me that we draw the line in these arbitrary ways. When we terms and conditions, bing, no problem.
Yeah.
We don't want the government watching over us, but we don't care if Facebook watches over us and geolocates us on a constant basis.
Yeah. Do you give Apple access to your camera? No. Well, then I can't use it. I can't use the app.
Right.
So I always say, everybody is going to say yes. It's just another pain.
So anyway, you think the AI, just to round off this and move on, you think the AI thing has run aground, even though there's an executive order, you feel it doesn't go far enough because there's no enforcement to it?
Right. I think it's well-intentioned, and let's hear more of it. But let's actually put some teeth into this thing.
I mean, it is notable, isn't it, Jefferson Graham, that everybody who works on AI, from the top tier people who are associated with AI, are warning and screaming and saying it's trouble. I mean, there are very few positive voices around.
Right, except for the people that are using it and enjoying it, right? Yeah.
Well, that's how they suck you in. That's how they suck you in, Jefferson Graham.
Yes. I love AI on Photoshop, by the way. What
is Jefferson Graham's view, asks Harry, on Pixel 8? Maybe tell us, kids, what Pixel 8 is.
Pixel 8 is the new phone from Google. I don't have an unlimited budget, so I couldn't go out and buy it. I asked Google for a review unit so I could let people like Harry know my thoughts, but they chose not to send it to me.
Wow.
Maybe they'll be listening today and they'll change their mind. But I have the iPhone. I've got the Galaxy. I got a lot of phones around here. I just haven't gotten to the Pixel 8. I was not a fan of previous Pixels. I did have the 6, and I thought the color was a little weird. But I know there's other people who love it.
I'll remind you that Jeff's the former USA Today tech writer, so he used to get all this stuff into his place, to test out and evaluate, and now he has to buy it really to evaluate it. But
some people send me review units. But anyway.
What about this nano thing, the 3 nano thing that Kim was talking about? What is it?
Okay.
What is it?
Basically, Apple introduced 3 new computers last night at 5 o'clock. And they are super, super, super fast per Apple. And they want us all to get excited about these chips, which I don't think most consumers care about. They care about the price. And they want a faster computer that is affordable. Well, these are pricey little computers. They start at $1,600, $1,800, and $2,000. And if you like to have fun like I do, you go on the website and you max it out so you can see what it'll come to. The $1,600 computer came out to $6,900. So
what do you max it out with that builds up all that other stuff?
More memory, more storage.
This is on the
Apple website.
But this is on what's equivalent of a MacBook Pro. Is that what you mean?
MacBook Pro. The MacBook Pro which is 14 inches, that starts at $1,600, max it out to $6,900.
But what if
Then,
you don't max it out? You just, I mean,
Well,
what if I don't
it's-
want the power steering? You know?
Yeah, well, it's $1,600 with 512 of RAM. Well, you want to get more RAM than that, so you have to pay another $300 for that. And then there's usually 500 gigs of storage. And if you've got a big computer and you're doing photos and video and other high-end things, you want to get more storage. So that's going to be another $400, $500, and it just goes on.
Here is a question for you, Jefferson Graham. Curtis says, is it true that on an Apple computer server has never been hacked? And if so, why don't more use it for that reason alone?
I can't answer that question. I can tell you that historically, Apple computers are said to be less susceptible to hacking. This has been going on for years, that Windows computers, because so many other companies are involved with the Windows computers, Dell and Lenovo and Intel, et cetera, they were more susceptible to hacking, where Apple is a closed system and they're less susceptible.
And Jefferson Graham, we get this question for you. Jefferson, do you cover the camera, the front of the iPhone, for privacy? And if so, do you do it always?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I want to use it. The camera that they usually cover is the webcam on your laptop.
Sure.
Because there's a fear that somebody could miraculously be clicking a button somewhere.
But you've said before that just doesn't happen. You think that that's a fake anxiety?
I think so.
It's fake news.
So.
Yeah.
Well, you remember, I had the friend who claimed that his daughter was being monitored, changing her clothes from the webcam, from the computer that would miraculously open up and then take pictures of her before she was going to bed and then close again. But I think that was fantasy land.
Okay. Jeff, what's on PhotoWalks TV that we can look forward to?
Well, my Nova Scotia piece that I trumpeted last week, it posted on Saturday, and I think it's one of my best, so I would love if people watched it. I have also shot 5 new how-tos this week on common mistakes that photographers make and how to fix them.
And again, to remind people, most of your time, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to make the point that you talk about photography. It's not just these big single-lens reflex cameras. You're talking about shooting on that iPhone or on an Android.
Yes. So I shot those. And then the other thing I did that I hopefully will be out this weekend is I have been doing a time-lapse video for the last 10 days in Manhattan Beach. Manhattan Beach being the idyllic Southern California beach community. And this is pure eye candy. It's one of the greatest things I've come up with, because I have a friend who lives by the beach, and I was able to park my camera there. And so I've been running it nonstop for 10 days. Clouds that are flying by, and sunrises and sunsets, and overcast days that turn into sunny days, and it's some pretty cool stuff.
How do you run it nonstop for 10 days?
You plug it into the wall so that it's charged, and you press record on the time lapse, and then you let it go.
It'll just keep going until you stop it.
That's right.
Wow, that's fascinating. I love that. So that's at PhotoWalks. Is that up there now?
They'll be up this weekend.
That's really great. I love it. And why can't you move a little bit the other way? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now I am. Now I am.
Well, now we're done, so it doesn't do us any good now.
Yeah, I'm going to be running it till Friday morning, and then I will pull it all together.
We love him. He's been really helpful to us through the many travails that we've encountered doing this show. So really, always a special place. And I just love your channel. Warning to anyone hacking my laptop. Anyone hacking my laptop camera, prepare to be bored.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
Yeah, not much there. Thank you, Common. Jeff, all the best. We'll see you on PhotoWalks TV. Jefferson Graham, everybody. Come on.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at? Stay at home and get baked.
Yeah. I've got to dance out to the doctor. I know, it's terrible.
Oh, man.
But Kim is here, and a really great column dropped all about the Gaza-Israeli conflict. So we will not neglect getting to that. It'll happen here in the next couple of minutes. The brilliant Jim Avila will join Kim. And
we have the best conversations without you, too. So it's going to be really good. No offense.
Wait a minute.
What?
Yeah. But I am looking forward to listening myself. I'll be listening in the car on the way to the doctor. And I will tell you that Jim, he himself has reported from war zones in the Middle East. Okay. He's reported from Lebanon during a war. I mean, Jim Avila is the real thing.
Yeah. Yes.
And the former senior correspondent at ABC News joins Kim, and he'll talk about what's going on in the Middle East and covering that war from the standpoint of the journalism, which has been so, I think, marked by early failures. It'll be a good conversation. I'm looking forward to it. So, Kim, smash the like button.
Smash it with your iron rod.
And I'll head to the doc, and it's all about Kim. Show her the same level of disrespect that you show me. Thank you.
No.
Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.
That's it for you, huh? All right. Well, I am Kim McAllister, of course, Mark Thompson off to the doctor. And the first thing we're doing here is a little bit more news. That is right. So let's get right to it. See if I can play the music by myself. I feel it. I feel it coming on. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. So let's talk about what's happening. Israeli diplomats at the UN are wearing Holocaust-era yellow stars. They say they'll wear these stars that say never again until the Security Council condemns Hamas. The lead Israeli UN representative said the stars will remind the body what it means to be silent in the face of evil. Of course, the Nazis made Jews wear these yellow stars during the Holocaust. The Security Council rarely agrees on any issues, as Russia and China usually veto any high-profile resolutions. Meanwhile, protesters calling for a ceasefire in Gaza were interrupting the congressional hearing on Israel and Ukraine funding today. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was interrupted several times during his opening statement before the Senate Appropriations Committee. Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin testified before the committee in support of the administration's request for funding. Davis police are investigating an alleged anti-Semitic hate incident. Monday morning, graffiti targeting the Jewish community was found spray-painted on a wall that separates Highway 113 from a green belt there at near the UC Davis campus. The graffiti, which has since been removed from the wall, likely sprayed sometime overnight Sunday into Monday. They haven't identified any suspects there as of yet. There are some new details emerging about the mass shooter in Maine. It killed 18 people before the suspect took his own life. Robert Card was an Army reservist sent for evaluation in July after he was seen behaving erratically. And again, this is in the area of Maine. So what we know now is the Army said Card shouldn't have a weapon, shouldn't handle ammunition, and shouldn't participate in live fire activity either. Consumer confidence is down for the third straight month. The conference's board's Consumer Confidence Index slipped nearly 2 points in October. The board's chief economist said many Americans are worried about rising prices, particularly for gas and groceries. Disturbance in the Eastern Caribbean is being given a high chance of becoming the next named storm. The National Hurricane Center says the area of low pressure is producing showers and thunderstorms. It's got 70% chance now of developing in the next 7 days. That system expected to move west and bring heavy rains to part of Central America by the end of the week. This is great. California is about to become home to millions of new fruit flies. Welcome aboard, fellas. The California Department of Food and Agriculture is taking action after invasive, destructive Mediterranean fruit flies were found at a Los Angeles area home. The agency quarantined 69 square miles of the city in response. They will release sterile male fruit flies to get rid of them. This according to SF Gate. The males mate with the females, which in turn can't produce offspring, so gradually decreases the population. Can you imagine an outbreak from just one house? Man. 36% of working households in Sonoma County are unable to afford basic household necessities. That according to a study from an institute affiliated with the Federal Reserve. Economists say those struggling to survive include teachers, firefighters, and paramedics. The United Ways of California Real Cost Measures 2023 study also says 34% of our state's households are unable to afford basic household necessities. It's 3.7 million households affected by this. And lastly, the very last Beatles song will premiere on iHeartMedia broadcast stations nationwide on Thursday. It's called Now and Then. It was written and sung by John Lennon decades ago, but newly developed AI technology has finally allowed every Beatle to contribute to the finished song. It includes guitar parts recorded by George Harrison before his death, Ringo Starr's drumming, and Paul McCartney's bass and piano. Now and Then will debut on more than 740 iHeart stations at 10 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. And this report is sponsored by our amazing friends at Coachella Valley Coffee. Of course, you know it. It's the best coffee there is. You get 10% off just for being a Mark Thompson Show listener. We've got a code MARKT. You can see it at the bottom of the screen there. So if you check out, the tea is amazing. The coffee is amazing as well. It's upscale. So, you know, if you spend a little on your coffee, then this is definitely worth your time. But you get 10% off MARKT at checkout. And our huge thanks to Coachella Valley Coffee for being supporters of the show. Okay, something else I wanted to bring up to you guys was this article written by former White House correspondent for ABC News, Jim Avila. He has been in war zones around the world, from Afghanistan to, I believe, Libya, maybe Syria. We'll talk to him. I'll get the details. But there have been points where he's feared for his safety, tried to rationalize that, you know, he'd talk his way out of this or somehow make it through. We talked to him a bit about it on September 11th, and I think it's time to dig in a little bit deeper. Please help me welcome Jim Avila to the Mark Thompson Show. Hi there.
Good morning, Kim, or good afternoon, I guess it is.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being with us on the Mark Thompson Show.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so I was reading this article, and one of the things that stuck out to me was you talking about kind of self-rationalizing. Maybe if a bomb hits me, it'll hit the mattress and the mattress will protect me, and trying to, like, you know, it's funny how we talk ourselves into getting through it, right? Doing the job, doing the thing we're there to do, and figuring out a way to mentally handle it. Can you talk a little bit about how you mentally handled being in some very dangerous places?
Right. And this is all in the context of what journalists are going through right now in Israel and Gaza. And what I was trying to do is bring some context to it. Mm-hmm. And so my first combat experience was in the 80s when you were just a little girl. And I was in Beirut. And that was before the days when the networks, and I was at that time at the local station in Chicago, WBBM, handed out protection gear of any kind. You didn't wear bulletproof vests or helmets or anything like that. So, you know, then at that time in Beirut, the Muslims were fighting the Christians. There were two militias, and they were sending mortars and bombs across, and then also doing car bombs. There were a lot of car bombs.
Yeah.
So at night, and those rockets would hit inadvertently. It hit that hotel that I was in at one point. It was a big press hotel where all the press stayed. And because I had known that it hit there before, when I got there, it was my first combat experience, I slept underneath the bed because I had hoped that if something hit the hit the hotel, that the concrete would hit the mattress and maybe not hurt me as badly. That was probably foolish, but it made me feel a little bit more secure. Over the years, when I went to work with the network and covered the Persian Gulf, the first Persian Gulf War, I was in Tel Aviv and Saudi Arabia, where Saddam was hurling Scud missiles, and we all thought that there was a chance they would have some kind of chemical weapon in them. So we donned these gas masks there.
That's so scary, really scary.
It was scary, and anybody who tells you who has been in combat zones that they weren't scared, I would check their pulse, because they're probably lying. It is frightening. It is. You try to avoid it as much as you can. Then I was in the Afghanistan. I went to Afghanistan to cover the war there, and I covered the war in Baghdad, the second one. So I've had quite a bit of experience at it. So I wanted to kind of try to relate to my readers and to your viewers what these reporters are going through, especially. I mean, look, the anchors who are there for CNN and for the other networks who were up on the rooftops in Tel Aviv, yes, that's dangerous. A rocket could hit them at any moment. I understand that. But the real danger comes to the people in Gaza and the reporters and producers who are Arab, Palestinians, who usually work for Arab outlets and then freelance for the networks and send in their video. They are under the same bombardment from Israel that the regular Palestinians are. And the danger that they're in is just amazing. Some people have lost their families. People have died. 31 journalists have been killed in this Hamas Israel war, most of them in Palestine, most of them in the Gaza Strip.
As a matter of fact, let me just stop you, because last night, and as I was reading your story, I was doing a little research ahead of our conversation. And as I'm doing research, an attack happens last night. It hit a group of journalists, hit a group of journalists identified as press in South Lebanon. One of them's dead. Others are injured. They were standing next to a clearly marked news van that was hit. And so they're now in the hospital. This is Reporters Without Borders saying that this incident happened on Sunday. The strikes hit a group of journalists in southern Lebanon. They think that journalists were actually targeted rather than this being accidental, that they're actually targeting members of the media.
Did it say who is suspected? Which side is suspected of doing it?
There's different.
Hezbollah or the IDF?
The first strike, let's see, they said, what we can prove with facts is the location where the journalists were standing was explicitly targeted. They were clearly identified as journalists. They say that the journalists wore helmets and vests marked with press, that it came from one area, but that, no, they don't know. I mean, they say they're trying to say the incident's under review. Israel's reviewing it, but it depends on what you read, depending on who's at fault, right? Yeah,
there's a lot of fog of war out there.
Yeah.
Yes, we all wear these vests that say press on them, but those vests and that helmet doesn't do anything against high-powered rifles. Doesn't do anything against certainly against jet fire and explosions. It doesn't do anything, and the vests do not protect against Army assault rifles. They're just not that strong. So even it's almost like me sleeping under the mattress. It makes you feel better, but it really doesn't do much good.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was in Afghanistan, and there were a lot of IEDs, car bombs, things like that, when we went out to shoot stories, I not only wore the vest at that time, but I sat on a vest just in case there was an IED that came up through the floor. So,
wow.
Would that have really worked? I don't know, but it made me feel just a little bit better as I had my headphones on and my head down and
do what you got to do.
Listening to U2 and hoping that I would make it through the day. But again, the point of all this is not to talk about my personal stories, but to remind people what these reporters and producers are going through. And these are not the high-paid anchors, who are out there and, will come home safely to the United States and enjoy all the perks that come with. And, I'm not criticizing them. I enjoyed those same perks of living in a place where you are safe and you make a lot of money. Yeah. These folks will continue to live probably in the Gaza Strip, and they're in the Gaza Strip now, and they producers there aren't making a lot of money. Most of them are day workers.
Right. But there's a big difference, and this is totally not comparable at all. But I've been to protests, right, around the Bay Area covering these stories, and there's a big difference from doing it in the studio or even, watching the news from home and putting yourself in the heart of the action. I had a reporter friend who ended up getting rounded up with a bunch of people, zip tied and arrested. When you go and you put yourself at the scene of it all, in the war zone where it's happening, that's a little bit different from anything else. I mean, you're putting yourself in danger. And I guess what I want to ask you is the risk, and I already know your answer, is the risk worth the need for that information?
Well, I mean, if we didn't have these people in Gaza risking their lives as bombs fall, we would only know. I mean, remember, look, the Israelis have every right to defend themselves. I understand what they're doing. I may not agree with the ferocity with which they're doing it, and the fact that and the indiscriminate nature of which they're doing it. But we would only know their story. We would only know the story from the Israeli, the IDF. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are like our military. They're not always forthright and not really saying what they're doing. And if we didn't have those people in Gaza, we'd only have that one part of the story. I think we need both sides to understand really what's going on. And the side from the Gaza right now is making a huge difference. People are beginning to question whether or not this all-out invasion is the best way to do this, the best way to root out Hamas. And I think that's the reason why it is so very necessary for us to risk our lives. I was a lot younger then. My last combat was in Baghdad, and I tell the story in my article is that I was staying in the NBC. NBC had taken over a small hotel, which they just where we all stayed, and we had the broadcast stuff on the top, and we had hired local workers, and somebody put an IED in the front lobby, and it killed the two local workers, and of course roused us all out of our beds. And I went down, and my camera people all, I wasn't the only reporter there, but the camera people got all their gear on and started shooting, and they see, and one of the things they shoot is me yelling, is everybody okay? And looking through, it was all full of dust and everything. Well, the Today Show, I didn't know that they had gotten that video. They ran it that morning, and my kids were watching.
Yeah.
And, it just really, you can imagine what it would do to your kids, Kim.
I completely agree with your daughter, because if this is that moment where she called you and said, Daddy, I think you need to come home. Yeah. And you had to come home, and you're like, I think you're right. I mean, so we do this as journalists, and I compare myself to you only in that we're both, in the same hemisphere, but you're in a different stratosphere. Okay.
That's not fair.
It's very fair. You've been reporting from war zones, and you've been reporting on a national level, and so there's really no comparison. However, the thing we share is the desire to tell the truth, the desire to get to the heart of a story and really share the truth with people. And so you'll have people say, oh, disinformation, oh, the media doesn't know. What we do is try to tell the truth. And I will defend that. I will defend us to my last breath, is trying to get the truth out about whatever story we've been assigned, whatever story that we're trying to tell.
Yes, and I think here's what viewers and readers have to look at if we make a mistake, and we do make mistakes, do we correct that mistake?
Yes.
Publicly?
Yes.
Now, the New York Times recently, and I wrote about this last week, made a huge mistake in taking the word of Hamas and saying that hospital bombing was clearly caused by an airstrike by Israel. That's still up for debate, but they put it out as though it had happened. Well, there were so many complaints and so much correction done to the New York Times by their own staff complained about what they did, so that they produced and put out an apology and a promise to do better.
Yeah,
that's how you decide.
That's real journalism.
That's how you decide who you should believe and who you should read.
I've
never seen anything like that on Fox or Bannon or any of those other crazies on the right side. They do not correct themselves with their conspiracy theories are proven wrong.
No, they don't care about the truth. The telling the truth of the story is not what they're about. They're about collecting public opinion and swaying it in the way they so choose. But I'm seeing, Jim, even the stories that say so far 9,000 people on both sides of the conflict have lost their lives. Well, who says? The Palestinian Health Authority says 8,000 people have died there. The IDF has different information. So how do you know what's true? And that's why it's so important to have reporters and people there that are getting to the heart of the matter, that are getting to the truth. But I want to tell you this, and you probably have seen this information. I'm looking at this information from the Committee to Protect Journalists. And they showed that, and I think 2023 is going to outdo it, but 2022 was very deadly for members of the press. 67 journalists, at least, and media workers were killed during that year, and it's the highest number since 2018. It was a 50% increase from 2021, driven by a high number of journalist deaths covering the Ukraine war, and a sharp rise in killings in Latin America. What's interesting here is that the Committee to Protect Journalists breaks it down in the reasons why journalists sometimes are targeted. Sometimes it's just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, like being in the war zone and, happening to get hit. Sometimes journalists are targeted for telling the truth because somebody doesn't want that information to be released. So
yeah, and it is part of the job. Especially you see that in Mexico. There's a lot of journalists in Mexico who have been writing exposés on the cartels and on the Mexican government. And they have been targeted, jailed, killed in Mexico because not by accident. That's on purpose.
That's right.
So I think it is. And I think in Ukraine, you might see more of that. I'm not so sure that, I'd be surprised if we find out that those journalists that you were talking about in southern Lebanon, maybe, but over there, I don't see the advantage of the Israelis killing journalists, and I don't see the advantage of Hamas killing journalists. Hamas wants their story out, as crooked and as crazy as it may be. They want people to know that Gazans are being killed, because that they're hoping that Israel will back off. So I don't think it's so much the case there. But in other places, and I know that, I didn't cover much in Central America, but my friend Josh Mankiewicz did. And I know that they were targeting journalists there. And there was an ABC correspondent who was put against the wall and shot. And in fact, there was a movie made about that in Nicaragua, about the Nicaraguan war and how he was killed. So yes, sometimes they are targeted.
It's really scary. I guess now journalists being sent to war zones, probably more so than when you were doing this, are being given safety training, are being taught certain ways to try to survive. But I don't know, did you have to go through anything like that?
Yes, we went to Baghdad when Saddam Hussein was believed to have had chemical weapons and used them on his own people. And I was at NBC at the time. They sent us to a week-long course that mostly covered first aid, how to make a tourniquet, how to carry dead weight over your shoulder to get your colleague to help, first aid stuff, how to get your your gas mask on quickly. We would have those drills. And then they had these hostage drills where a group of terrorists would come into our classroom where we were studying this stuff, and they would take us hostage and put us on a bus and was driving us off to somewhere. And we had to figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to be not noticed. The idea is to turn gray, not be the person who was stuck out. Now it was one of those school buses with the back door, and I was sitting back there, and I quietly opened the back door and jumped out and ran away. And I got an A for that, but that was not what you're supposed to do.
Well, you survived. You survived the fake attack. You know what's shocking to me is after all that training and after a simulated hostage taking thing that you actually got on the plane and went to the war zone.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple reasons for that. The first one being, I believe it's important that we go and we cover both what our military is doing and what the other military is doing. Secondly, I was younger and ambitious, and I was the lead national correspondent for Tom Brokaw's Nightly News. I was on him practically every night. And I thought, they asked for volunteers. Nobody said you had to go. But I thought in that position that I couldn't let the younger cannon fodder go. I had to go as an example. And so I did volunteer and went. So it was part ambition, part adrenaline seeking. There's no doubt that that causes a lot of adrenaline, and also part, hopefully, mostly the wanting to make sure that the truth was told.
Yeah, it's man, I can't even imagine the things that you thought or the moments that you thought your life was over in those. Did you ever have, other than the bombing of that lobby, did you ever have any of these moments where you thought, this might be it for me?
Well, there were close calls. When I was in Beirut early on in '83, there was a TWA hijacking. I don't know if you're listening to your viewers or you remember that, but there was a hijacking of a TWA plane, and it flew to Beirut and was on the airstrip for a long time. And I was a Chicago reporter, and the people on the flight had left from Chicago to go to Paris when they hijacked it. So it was a big local story. So they sent me to Beirut. I had been there before, so that they were interested in me going. And I was standing. There was a how they used to have in airports a little deck where you could see the airstrip outside. And so we were up on there with other photographers, and they were shooting. And you hear this ping, 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 and it was the guys sticking their heads out of the pilot's seat and the cabin cockpit and shooting at us. And so, yes, that was very close. And I heard that. When I was in Afghanistan years later, we had my friends and I, photographer friends and sound man and myself, outfitted a small school bus because we had to go from Kabul to Tora Bora, and there was no way to get there but to drive. And so we got an Afghanistan driver, and we piled in there, and we drove toward Tora Bora. About halfway through, some militia folks didn't know what we were doing and was at a roadblock. They kicked in the bus door, came on the bus, waving their guns, and I thought, well, this could be it. But the Afghanistan driver was able to talk them down, and they allowed us to go by.
Wow.
So he told them we wanted to tell their story, wanted to get to Tora Bora and tell them what we were going on. So most of the time, being a member of the press is protection. Not always, but most of the time. We don't carry guns. We're no threat to them.
Right.
That we have no guns. We have nothing like that. I was, in fact, asleep in the retrofitted school bus when it happened. So it was, yes, there've been several times where it's been close.
I know you didn't want to make it about you, but I always want to make it about you. Is there a story from your reporting in war zones that stands out to you as being one of the things you're most proud of? Shining a light on.
One of the ones I found most interesting when I was in Baghdad, and the way the Baghdad thing happened was you would go for a month, go home for a month, go back for a month. So I went like 4 or 5 times. And it was interesting because the first month we went to Baghdad, everybody, the crowds were happy that we were there. They were celebrating the fall of the Saddam statue. You've probably all seen that. I was there at that time. And, they were glad. America's here. They're going to save us. Second time we went back after a month away, they were asking us, why can't you get our cell phones working? You can send a man to the moon. Why can't I still make a call home? Well, the reason, of course, was that the Pentagon decided they wanted a blackout of all cell phones so the enemy could not organize. So they were beginning to get a little mad at us. The third time I went back, they had blown up the UN, the United Nations, and it was beginning to get serious, and it was beginning to turn. And then the fourth time I went back is when they bombed our hotel. As far as being what I was proud of, in the first tour, there were some very interesting stories about. We got access to one of Saddam's worst prisons, his jail. That was a very interesting story. We also rode with that special team that was there to try to find weapons of mass destruction. And we tagged along with them. And that was very interesting because they weren't finding them and they were getting very frustrated. And we brought that back to the United States to show that maybe they're not here. And then finally, there was a really interesting story that I did. There was a guy who had dug a hole out in his backyard during the last years of Saddam. And he was in that hole, living in that hole. People would bring him in the village, would bring him food. But he was living in that hole because he had said something bad about Saddam and he was hiding from him. And he hid in that hole for like 2 years. And my producer and I went and shot video of him coming out of the hole finally to tell him that Saddam was no longer, as the villagers told him, Saddam was no longer around. Yeah. And the joy that was there was pretty amazing. That's a memorable story.
Can you talk a little bit about the benefits of working as a reporter on your own with just either you and a crew versus being embedded with a military unit? Because it seems like being embedded is safer, but also you're really just getting the perspective of what the military wants you to see, perhaps, or what it's like to be, on a patrol with the U.S. forces, but you're not outside of that, kind of digging into other, angles of stories. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's benefits to both. Both are quite dangerous. One of my friends, very good friend, David Bloom at NBC, died while being embedded. He died not of an attack. He died because he was sitting on top of the tank that was going into Iraq in a cross-legged fashion for so long that he got a blood clot. It went to his heart and he died while embedded. Another friend of mine, a photographer, did go. Who was usually my photographer. And I was scheduled to go on an embed with him. But at the last minute, NBC decided that they wanted me to be one of the lead people going into Baghdad separately. So we went in in an armored car from Turkey, drove in just as that statue was coming down. Now, who had the best? I cannot forget the video that you would see every night on Nightline of their reporters who were embedded on those tanks going in with the invasion. That was amazing. It was amazing to see. And you really saw the power and the might of the American military. Is that valuable? Yeah, it is. Yeah. At the same time, and those people who were embedded, once they got there, they got off the tanks, went into our bureau and worked on their own as we did. So it wasn't like they were stuck with the military the whole time. And I think they were very careful when they were on with the embeds, when they were embedded, to point out that their material that was coming in was censored, was reviewed by the military before it was allowed to go out. And that was for safety reasons and for intelligence reasons. And the networks agreed to that. I don't have any problem with that.
No, I don't either. But I do think that's a whole different, I don't know, style of reporting, way of reporting. What you're seeing is going to be different. I was also reading with the Committee to Protect Journalists that a lot of times journalists, instead of having a whole crew with them, or sometimes a station will provide security, they can't get where they need to be in order to get the story. So they ditch their crew, they ditch the security, and they go off on their own to try to get it. Because when you have a whole group of journalists, a pack of people together, that you can be more of a target.
I was not involved in any pack reporting there. We had a bureau. We had 3 correspondents in Baghdad. I was the lead correspondent. I had a producer and a crew. And we got our assignments and developed stories and went out on our own. We always had a security person with us. Now, that security person, I don't think they were, well, maybe they were. I was never sure whether they were armed or not. They didn't show me the gun. We didn't really want them to be armed, but I had the feeling they were all former RAF guys from England and some from South Africa. And they were very smart and very good at recognizing when you were in a situation you shouldn't be in and to get out of it. And they were also very good at camping and stuff like this. When we were in Afghanistan, we didn't stay, we stayed in tents. And these guys would make field showers. You know, they'd get a bucket and put one bucket up here with soap and one bucket with clean water with a rope, with each of them having a rope, and you pulled the rope on the one with soap in it and you washed off, and then you pulled the one with the clean water in it. They also knew how to make fires, and we were able to, we had also workers with us, Afghan workers who would cook goat. You know, that was food, because otherwise we were eating MREs. So they were very valuable people, these security guys, and I developed friendships with them, and they were reliable.
Off topic a little bit, but you being on TV for so long makes me think of the difference in the way we see wars reported. So Vietnam, I'm thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, was really the first war that we saw video images of war on the television, right? Where the American people really saw this is what war means. So, these are the coffins coming home. This is what's happening over there. Now we have social media where we have images taken. We don't necessarily know where they come from. We don't necessarily know the people taking them are reporters or not. Most of them are just civilians or maybe members of the military or wherever. Is there a difference between the way information is coming out, and should we be relying on random videos that may or may not really tell truthful stories? Because the people that are shooting them, the videos, and then putting them on the internet for all to see, maybe that's what really happened, and maybe there's more to the story than what we're hearing.
Oh yeah, you have to be very careful, Kim. Yeah. If you're just scanning the internet, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and looking for videos of what's going on in the Middle East, there's a very good chance you're looking at artificial intelligence, that you're looking at doctored video. You know, there was a terrible doctored video that I almost wrote about this week. Maybe I'll write about it next week, with Clarissa Ward. I don't know if you heard about this one, but she was caught she was out doing a story, and an air raid siren came on, and so they started running to shelter. Well, someone took that video and made it look like she had made it up, and was playing music, and it became went viral that she had faked this attack, which was not true.
Yeah.
So you can't believe. You have to filter it somehow. Yep. I continue to recommend to Mark's show, to Mark himself, who sometimes goes a little crazy on the internet. that to turn off that stuff. Find somebody you trust. Find news organization you trust, whether it's CNN, who is very trustworthy during these kind of breaking news stories.
Yes.
They're the best. They're very good at it. Or one of the three, or just watch the half hour at 6:30 or whenever it's on in your neighborhood of the network newscast. They do use some of that video, but they vet it first, or they tell you we've not been able to verify this video yet, but it's important enough that we're going to show it to you. So you need a filter. I always believed, and I've always believed, that the value of the network news is that you have a group of professionals. There's no commentary on the network news on ABC, CBS, or NBC. There's no time. We got 18 minutes. We got to give you the news.
Tell the story and get in and get out. Yeah.
Right. They're giving you straight news. Pick one you trust. And they, the group of professionals there are deciding what's newsworthy, deciding what's true, or the closest to truth they can get. And when they don't know what the truth is, they tell you, we don't know what the truth is.
Yeah.
That's how you should be getting your news. And I would watch cat videos on Twitter and not the rest of it.
Which leads me to my last question on this topic, because I know I've kept you too long, but I could seriously always talk to you all day long. How did you, so for someone here, seeing what's going on with the Israel-Hamas conflict and seeing all the people and all the children and the blood-streaked faces, it's, hard to watch. I can't even imagine being there and going through it. Boo-hoo for me having to sit here and watch it, but it's hard on the mental health. When you are in war zones and camping out and in search of the truth and being shot at and having bombs dropped on the hotel lobby and you can't get out of it, right? You're in there. How do you protect your mental health when you're in the thick of it?
Well, that's one of the reasons why they rotate us through. So you go in for a little bit, and at any time, it's all volunteer work. At any time, you can say, I've had enough. Plus, the networks do offer mental health. They offer, free psychiatric help, counseling in groups or in by yourself. So there is that. And you come home and you hug your kids. That's the way that I got through it. And at some point you have to say no more. And I left NBC partly because the day-to-day news was very difficult on me for a while. Yeah. And so I decided, going to a shooting, a mass shooting is just as difficult as being in the wars.
I agree.
I covered hard. Jonesboro, I covered Columbine, all those big school shootings, and then I covered the one in Sandy Hook as well. Those are just as difficult. And so at some point, at that point at NBC, in the next contract negotiations, I said I want to do, at that time, Dateline, and they were kind of wishy-washy, and so I asked ABC, and they said, come on over.
Yeah.
So I went to 2020, which at that time was doing mostly, profiles and consumer stuff, and was not doing day-to-day crime like they are now.
I think you earned the break.
Yeah, it was a lot. Doing long form was a great break.
Square writes, thank you, Jim Avila, for all those years in the battle zones. Glad you squeezed through it and are here with us. I have particular thankfulness and gratefulness to your daughter, who I think made the call at the right time, got you home so that we could be having this conversation today. Right. So huge thanks to her. Vicky says Jim Avila is the best. I completely agree with you. Before I have time to squeeze every last drop out of my Jim Avila appearance. Before I let you go, we were talking earlier on the Mark Thompson
Where's that
show.
Guy who always trolls me, though? What's he saying?
Is he here? I don't know if he's here. I already zapped some Trumpy people out of the audience.
Yeah.
But I wanted to cover something with you that we talked to David Cay Johnston about earlier. And it's this hearings today and yesterday in Colorado and Minnesota about the 14th Amendment and whether or not Trump should appear on the ballot in those two states. I love your opinion on this the most because you give me hope that we hear David Katz on the show say, and maybe he's based in reality, but he'll say, it's all a bunch, it'll never hold water. It's all a bunch of hot air. They'll get to the Supreme Court and it's going to fall apart. He's going to be on the ballot. It's just, you can't do anything about it. What do you think that the 14th Amendment, and in these states where you don't have to be convicted of aiding and abetting an insurrection, I guess it's just up to a single judge. Do you think we could see Trump taken off the ballot realistically?
I got to agree with David Cay Johnston.
Oh.
I don't think. I think the way to get rid of Donald Trump is to beat him badly in a landslide election. Okay. He will be so damaged by the time we get to next November by all these trials. He may be even, there's a lot of people saying right now, which they weren't saying, and I didn't necessarily agree with them right away, that he may go to jail for contempt. Is on the next one. I think he will be so damaged among independents that there is little chance of him winning the election, and there's a big chance that he'll be defeated soundly. That's the way you get rid of Donald Trump. Yeah. I worry. I still worry about Joe Biden. He's performed quite well. But there continues to be little things. He's been in politics so long that there's little things. I mean, just the other day, or I think it was yesterday, something came out about that he had more documents, that were there, and that he had fake email account, not fake, but other email accounts where he was, while vice president, communicating with folks. And now there's an investigation into whether or not those emails contained government business. So it's there's just so many little things that, I worry that, that he's going to be chipped away at. Yeah. The economy is good, however, that's good for him. Except, as you just read in your news story, for many people, even though the economy is good, it's not reaching down to them. And
things are more expensive than ever, right? Yeah. Go to the grocery store and it's head turning.
Yeah. So, there are some issues, but I believe that when it comes down to it in the end, when independents and Democrats go into the voting booth and they see two names, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, that they're not going to pick Donald Trump.
I hope not. I was reading.
If he was running against somebody else, Kim, I think that might be a problem.
There's a
if
recent
he's running
poll
against Nikki Haley or something like that, if something happens and the Republicans ditch Donald Trump, more of a contest.
I was reading just a survey among Republicans. A recent poll had Donald Trump 30 points ahead of his nearest challenger, which I think was Nikki Haley, and I want to say DeSantis were tied. 30 points above is Trump. So I know you talk about polls and the accuracy of polls and who answers the phone when the pollsters call and all of these things, but it still just continues to surprise the hell out of me.
Yeah, and that was a Republican poll. So, I think that independents right now are waiting to see, and they're watching a lot, but I think they'll break heavily toward Joe Biden.
I'm gonna go to bed thinking about that. So thank you. Jim Avila, you are just the real deal and the total best, and I appreciate it. I know you're taking time away from your family to talk to us today, so thank you for that. Sure. And I hope you have a great Halloween. Any big Halloween plans?
To hide in my house.
Oh, is that what you're gonna do? Turn the porch light off?
Yeah.
Wrap up in a blanket and pretend you're not here?
I live in a pretty secure building. They're going to have to get past the guards first, so.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to come on, and thanks for your great reporting. I put a link in the chat, and I'll also put one in the show description today to Jim's article. Please read it. Really, really good work. Thank you, Jim Avila, for being on the Mark Thompson Show. Yeah. Bye. See you soon. Bye. Jim Avila, everybody. How lucky am I to be able to talk to him? It's a perk of being on the Mark Thompson Show for sure. Okay, so a little bit of That's Rich. Just a couple of stories before we rock out of the Mark Thompson Show on this Halloween. One of them was the Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer is renting out his Malibu mansion. And I'll tell you how much that mansion is being rented for during this abbreviated segment of the
Who are they? The top 0.1%. What are they like?
These people are so posh and snobby, they're snotty.
That's Rich on the Mark Thompson Show.
Just a couple of That's Rich stories. So this is Chad Smith, the drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he's got this amazing mansion in Malibu. 6-bedroom mansion. It is 5-bath beachside house. He bought it for $8.5 million back in 2006. He is renting it out. So if you wanted to go stay there, totally could do it for $95,000 a month. $95,000 a month. We're just going to round up and call it $100,000 a month. I'm telling you, it's pretty nice. I mean, when you think of, where you would want to stay for a month, I can think of a lot worse places than this beautiful Malibu, gorgeous mansion. It's, again, right on the ocean. It's all very modern looking. And I guess you could say California beach. Here's a picture of the kitchen. Check that out. Pretty nice. Got the beach right outside. $95,000 a month. That is definitely rich. Yeah. Again, 6 bedrooms in this place. The family room, perfect for hosting gatherings. Fireplace for cozy evenings out on the cool coast. It's a wall of oversized windows looking right out onto the ocean. A Mediterranean style compound for elevated living, they call it. Yeah. $95,000 a month. Good luck. Good luck with that. I'll tell you. Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith, they've got a $63 million property, and there's now a portfolio. They have, apparently, according to this article, they've got 4 mortgages, 2 mansions for the children as they live far apart during their 7-year separation. They've taken out 4 mortgages worth $11,820,000. Let me get the Red Hot Chili Pepper one off the screen. I think that they can afford it, but I don't know. It just seems like big movie stars. So among the mortgage properties, 2 mansions gifted to their children. Must be nice. Willow, 22, and Jaden, 25. A mansion for you and a mansion for you. Jada has her own house near Will in Calabasas. Yeah, $63 million worth of properties that they have. This is the life. This is the rich life. I'm telling you, I can't even, would you love to be able to give your child a house? Part of me would, because I don't think they'll ever be able to afford to live in California or live near where I live unless I help them buy a house in some way. But on the other hand, you don't appreciate something unless you struggle for it. Sometimes, I think. They've got a lot of property, though. And I guess if you have that much money, why not go ahead and gift it to your children? Nancy Sinatra's former Beverly Hills home has finally sold. That's a new story that is nice because she had it on the market for quite a while. It doesn't say how much it sold for. Try to open the story and it's not popping open. But yeah, so her house finally sold in Beverly Hills. It got to be a limited number of people able to afford these multi-million-dollar homes. Just wild. Kirstie Alley also was able to sell her home. It was $5.2 million. Of course, she died a year ago of colon cancer. And so her home officially sold in Clearwater, Florida for $5.2 million. It was on the market for quite a while. It's a 9-bedroom, 10-bath, heated swimming pool, spacious backyard. So, yeah. Finally sold. Oh, who's buying all these expensive houses like this? Well, time to end the Mark Thompson Show. I have to say that very grateful for all the comments and the ways you participate in the show. Of course, Mark back tomorrow after his doctor's appointment. And Oh, you're talking about Matthew Perry's home? Yeah, I don't know how much it is worth, Square. I'm sure we'll find that out. Yeah. Thank you for the ways you contribute to the show, whether that's Patreon or PayPal, or whether you have contributed to the super stickers in the chat today. We really appreciate it. The Mark Thompson Show team. And again, we couldn't be here doing this without you. Also, our huge thanks to Nuda Winery in Livermore and Coachella Valley Coffee in the Coachella Valley for sponsoring parts of our show as well. So tomorrow on the Mark Thompson Show, John Rothman will join us. So we'll talk about politics with John Rothman, and we'll have some other fun things scheduled for you as well. For right now, two things to refer you to. First, the Avila Jim Avila wrote. I put the link in the chat. It's really worthwhile and a great read. Also, we've got the After Party Live coming up. We'll lighten things up on this Halloween. So I will see you over at the After Party in mere moments. Until then, we're going to play the Mark Thompson video out. And again, thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.